Welcome to Stream of Conscience, brought to you by Democracy for America, Fairfield County, where we believe that change is possible and you can make it happen. I'm your host, John Hartwell. Our guest today is Nancy Alderman, President of Environment and Human Health Incorporated, an organization dedicated to protecting human health from environmental harm through education, research, and promotion of sound public policy. Nancy has been a past contributor to this show, reporting on efforts to move environmental legislation through the General Assembly in Hartford. She returns today to talk about a new effort to galvanize opposition to hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking. Nancy, welcome back to Stream of Conscience.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm also joined by my DFA colleague and Stream of Conscience executive producer, Doug Sutherland. Doug, welcome back to this side of the camera.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Nancy, we've all become much more aware of fracking over the past year. It's a process that extracts natural gas from deposits deep underground by forcing vast amounts of water, chemicals, and sand into the sediment to break up the rock and free the gas. Doug and I did a show last year on this with your friend and colleague David Brown, reporting on what he's found with his team in western Pennsylvania, where fracking is a huge business and the number of wells is increasing rapidly. Until recently, most of us believed that Connecticut didn't have commercially exploitable shale deposits, but that view may be changing. So can you bring us up to date? What's happening?
Well, I think all of us were told that Connecticut did not have shale, and so we didn't have to worry in Connecticut. And so it seemed very simple. However, in June, the USGS, the United States Geological Survey, came out with a new map. And the map was of New England. And it was really quite shocking because it showed a number of shale deposits, some of which were assessed and had quite a bit of natural gas underneath them. Some of them were not assessed, but were still there. And lo and behold, Connecticut had a shale right down the middle of the state, right under Hartford. So we thought, wow, this isn't like what we were told at all. We do have shale. Even if it is not assessed, the country is moving so quickly, trying to get every bit of natural gas they can, that nobody is really safe if they have shale. So then, looking at Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, where they have over 3,000 fracking wells, one can learn so much from that part of the country because they've been at it for a bunch of years. When Vice President Cheney, right before he became vice president, he was head of the Halliburton Company, and they are one of the main drillers. He knew about fracking in 2005 before most people knew about fracking. And as vice president, he was able to get what we call, or what we know of today, as the 2005 Energy Act. And what did that do? It did what Halliburton needed. It got rid of all the federal regulations. It exempted fracking from our Safe Drinking Water Act, from our Air Act, and even from the hazardous waste regulations.
And this was negotiated mostly behind closed doors, I believe, right?
Actually, I don't know how they got it to pass. My guess was because most people didn't know about fracking.
We weren't paying attention.
We weren't paying attention. After all, this is 2012. So we're a good 7 years from when that thing passed.
An analogous situation would be in the end of the Clinton administration when they took off all the controls on merging large banks and the securities industry.
Right. Before they knew what that would mean.
Yeah, well, some people knew what it meant. They just didn't listen to them.
Right, right. Well, anyway, now we know what this means. And so, what is fracking? Do most people really understand what is fracking? In order to get the natural gas out, and all people who worked on the environment were raised believing that natural gas was going to save all of us, that it
Right.
burned cleanly.
Right.
Well-
Everybody compares it to coal and they say, oh, natural gas is much better than coal.
Yeah, it burns so cleanly.
Right.
It does burn cleanly.
Right.
Right.
But somebody has to get it.
Right.
Yes.
That's the piece that nobody sort of understood. And when they did used to get natural gas, they drilled straight down, and it was a rather clean extraction.
Right. You're not taking off the tops of mountains like you're doing in Appalachia to get the coal.
Exactly.
So again, it doesn't look on the surface like it's such a big problem.
Right. But how do they get this gas now that the easy gas is gone? They go down a mile. Many times it's more than a mile. So, but certainly at least a mile. And then they go horizontally another mile. So what does that mean for our aquifers? Well, they say, the industry says, won't affect your aquifers at all. Your aquifers are not down a mile. We're going way past your aquifers and way over underneath your aquifers. So no problem. Well, there are serious problems. Every time you frack a well, you use between 5 and 8 million gallons of fresh water.
Over a year?
No. Each
No.
frack,
In a-
each
in a-
well.
In the
Each
process,
well.
right?
And you don't get the well done with one frack. Sometimes it takes 5 fracks, 6 fracks, 7 fracks.
And a frack is fracturing the sediments,
The shale
basically
that's way down.
basically breaking it up
Correct.
to allow the gas to escape.
Exactly.
That's why they call it fracturing.
That's right.
And hydraulic is by putting in the fluids and forcing the shale apart.
And then we have to talk about what are the fluids.
Right.
Well, they're not just the water. The water is, we're taking a lot of fresh water out of whatever system or state you live in. But that would be easy. What goes in is lots of sand. We call it silica. And as well, there are probably over 100 different chemicals, not all used in the same frack, but available. Many of them, well, most of them are toxic, but many of them are carcinogenic. It's a soup of really bad stuff.
Many of them are trade secrets that we don't get to find out about.
That's true too.
Right.
That's true too. And so what happens when it goes down a mile and horizontally another mile? What happens to that fluid? Some of it stays down there. But what happens to the rest that comes up? It doesn't come up in the same way it went down. It now comes up with salts, with radioactive material that we have in our deep, people know radon, that's radioactive coming from rock. Well, there's even more radioactive when you go down over a mile. So all of that comes back up, including arsenic, which is often down. And then what do you do with it? That's the tricky part. And why does Connecticut need to be so worried? Not just about fracking, but what about this waste? Millions of gallons of waste. What do we do with it? Well, there are 5 different ways that you can deal with it. But one of the ways, Pennsylvania it doesn't seem to have an infrastructure to inject it into the ground. So they're stuck. All these 3,000 wells with all this waste, they don't know what to do with it. So they're shipping it. So they've shipped it to Ohio, which has accepted it. It's gone into injection wells down into the deep underground of Ohio, where it has actually caused mild earthquakes. It's been shipped to New Jersey without the New Jersey legislature acting on it. So what does that mean? Has it come into Connecticut? Will it come into Connecticut? If the legislature in Connecticut does not act on it and ban waste coming in, there's nothing to stop it from coming in. Now, the important part to realize, the regulations are gone. The federal regulations are gone when it comes to fracking and fracking waste. So this is not an easy thing. It is something we all really have to be aware of. And then, what about fracking itself? Just because it's unassessed this year doesn't mean it will be unassessed, our shale, next year.
I'm sorry, when you say unassessed, you mean by the U.S. Geological Survey?
They have not come in.
They haven't come in, they haven't done an analysis of
how much
gas there might be underneath this
exactly.
shale.
There's one area called the Hartford Basin that's been assessed, I believe.
No,
that
it's
hasn't been assessed
the
either?
Hartford Basin is what's under Connecticut.
Okay.
And that has not been assessed.
Okay, that hasn't been
But
assessed.
that
either.
does not mean it won't be assessed.
Okay.
So, how long does such an assessment take, and how do they prioritize where they go and do their work next?
I have no idea how
Okay.
they assess it or when. I just know that if you have shale and they're after natural gas, you need to protect yourself.
And someone is going to come and assess it. Can the private companies do it themselves, or will
I-
they wait for the USGS?
I don't know, but I can tell you what Vermont has just done
Okay.
in their last legislative session. They are very much like Connecticut.
Oh, they're
They-
socialists in Vermont.
Yeah, right. Well, beside that, their shale is very much like
Oh, okay.
what's in Connecticut. And they, in this last session, banned fracking in Vermont,
Okay.
and they banned the waste from other states coming into Vermont. They said they wanted to protect their groundwater,
Mhm.
and they knew that fracking would not do that, and that the complaints about groundwater being contaminated were real. When you go down a mile, they do put a cement casing on it. If it should crack, all of those toxins, all of that fluid is going to get into the horizontal and keep going. So when you're down that far, it's we know from the BP spill, when it's down that far, it's hard to fix. Anyway, so Vermont got ahead of it. And once you've got it going in your state, very hard to deal with it. Very hard. And so they do have some shale. It's not that Vermont has none. Right above Vermont is Canada. And there is a shale deposit that goes in Quebec and comes down a little bit in Vermont next to Lake Champlain. That's all they have. And it's not a major threat, but they wanted to send out the word, fracking's dangerous, fracking will affect your groundwater. And it wasn't going to happen in Vermont where they have so many farms. Connecticut has spent so much money and effort to save farmland. Here we have an industry that goes after farms. That's who they hit in Pennsylvania, that gorgeous farmland in western Pennsylvania. That's what they did. They bought up the mining rights
Right.
underneath these farms. And many of the farmers did not know what that meant, that their animals would die, that the people would get sick. Because what happens when that gas comes up, it doesn't just come up as gas. It comes up with methane. It comes up, well, it is mainly methane, but it comes up with a ton of chemicals that the people breathe, the animals breathe. It produces serious air pollution, serious water pollution. And in a state as small as Connecticut, that prizes what farms we have left, we cannot afford to just leave this and say, oh, it won't happen here, or they won't send the waste here. We have chemical plants in Connecticut. That's a lot where they send their waste. If it gets into a waste treatment plant, which is what happened in Pennsylvania.
They banned that now, I think.
They have, but after the cows have left the barn.
Right.
And what that means is that we all know waste treatment plants were designed to get rid of human waste and animal waste. They weren't designed to get rid of chemicals. What goes in comes out and goes into the rivers. And in Pennsylvania, they have waste treatment plants on some of their drinkable rivers. Connecticut doesn't.
And we, as I said in the introduction, we actually had David Brown on the show to talk about what's going on in Pennsylvania, and some of the stories he told were really, in addition to being horrifying, they were heart-wrenching. Some of the things that have happened to people there and the way they're being affected.
Right.
So we obviously don't want that to happen here in Connecticut.
Right.
One of the issues that we really haven't explored on this show today is the loss of the water, because when you take millions of gallons of water and you put them down a mile, if they don't come up, they're lost because they won't return to the aquifer. They won't be part of the natural process. I mean, when we use water here on the surface, it goes to a water processing plant, and then it goes back to a river, or it goes to the sound, it gets evaporated, it comes back as rain. There's a cycle there.
Right.
And the water basically doesn't go away. It gets recycled and recycled and recycled. But if you stick it a mile down under the ground, you may never see it again.
Well, you get a lot of water back, but it's highly toxic.
But then you ship it to Ohio maybe, and then you inject that, and that part doesn't come back. So
That's true. And they have
Right.
5 ways of getting rid of this waste that comes back up, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
1, they have settling ponds, which is not good.
No.
2, actually some of them, the worst, is they put it on roads to either keep the dust down or de-ice. Think about putting all those toxins on our roads and then our cars going over it.
And then it washes off in the rain and it goes into the nearby fields and
Frightening.
makes its way into the water supply because it goes into the aquifer and it gets fed to somebody.
some of that
Yeah.
I think has been banned now in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken.
Using it on roads?
I think so. And even the settling ponds are now not being used like they were. I think,
So
because they leak.
So where's it going?
Right.
It's going into injection
Right.
Right.
wells, setting off small earthquakes. I mean, this is the problem here, is that instead of regulating this industry in a way that would protect all of us, in 2005, to make things easier for the drillers and the oil companies, the people in charge of our country took all the regulations out. So now we're stuck with technology being way ahead of regulation, or even the science. Even the science.
There's a lot of data that hasn't been gathered yet, analyzed yet. We don't know what the dangers are in a lot of cases, but we're not waiting for that information. We're going ahead. There's
Oh
like
no,
you
there's
said,
a
3,000
huge, there's a
wells.
land rush. There's a
Yeah.
land rush on in terms of gas. I mean, we've seen it. If just watch the campaigns and you know, especially on the Republican side, they're talking about, oh, now, you know, our energy needs are solved for the next 100 years. We've got all the gas in the world. We're going to be fine. Don't worry
And we
about
must get rid of regulations
And, well, of
that
course.
might get in our way.
it. Of course.
All right. Meanwhile, we just simply can't let all of this come into Connecticut. So Connecticut's a smart state. One of the reasons I've always liked living here and working here is it is a small state, so that you can get your hands around it.
Right.
And it's a smart state. But I'd like to go back to Vermont for a minute, because what they did with their law I thought was very smart. They banned it, but they didn't ban it for all time. They banned it and then said that their Department of Environmental Protection needed to assess how things were going and then to come back to the legislature in 2016 when they would look at it again. And I thought this was the way to go, because if you can get a handle on fracking, I don't know that you can, but let's for argument's sake say maybe you can get a handle on what to do with the waste, what to do with fracking so you don't ruin the aquifers and the drinking water of everybody. Then if that's the case, then we should revisit it. And I would hope that in Connecticut, if we could ban frack, we should ban the waste forever until we don't want other people's waste. But we should ban fracking in Connecticut, but then have a revisit and wait and see if science and regulations can catch up with something that right now is extremely dangerous.
And so what's the likelihood of getting a ban either on the waste or on fracking done in Connecticut?
I have learned I would never predict anything passing or not passing in Connecticut. I have watched some of the what I would call dumbest things pass, and I have watched some of the things that you wouldn't have to think twice about, like banning tanning for minors, when every piece of science tells us the melanoma rates for young women are coming off the charts due to tanning beds, and it doesn't get out of out of committee, and you're asking me what I think. What I think is, I have no idea. What do I think if I was Queen of Connecticut? It would pass.
Well, of course. So the likelihood of your becoming Queen of Connecticut
It's
anytime
very,
soon,
very
very
slim.
low. Yep.
That we can predict.
So it's true. So what should we be doing? The theme of this show is local action. Change is possible, and you can make it happen. So what do we need to do to bring about the changes that we want?
Well, we have a lobbyist. Environment and Human Health, Inc. has a lobbyist. You can't get anything done in Connecticut if you don't have a lobbyist.
So not all lobbyists are bad people.
No, everybody has a lobbyist. It's
Okay.
just usually industry has 10 lobbyists,
Right.
and nonprofits have one lobbyist.
One, and they share them.
Right, and they share them often. So, so what should people do? Our lobbyist, who's a wonderful lobbyist, explained to me that, of course, it's going to be hard, but that we need a coalition, and we need a coalition of organizations.
Okay.
So, not necessarily, well, individuals are always important, but he stressed organizations. So, any organization that is listening to this that would be interested in helping the plan to move ahead in this session to ban fracking in Connecticut, ban bringing in waste from the other states, the fracking waste, and allow revisiting within 3 years to see whether the regulations and science has caught up with fracking, so it's not a ban that never gets revisited. Anybody who would like to help us, it won't happen with us alone.
Do you have other organizations that have stepped forward so far?
I have not begun to work on it.
Okay.
My plan is, we're now in the first week in September,
Mm-hmm.
and my plan, the session doesn't start till January, and my plan was to spend the fall trying to get organizations. I have visited the Council of Environmental Quality
Okay.
at their August meeting, and they are very interested in this.
How about the Sierra Club or Greenpeace or
I'm hopeful, and the
Rivers
Connecticut
Alliance
Fund,
or
the
Connecticut Fund for the Environment?
they have saved the sound underneath them.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the sound will be impacted if the
course.
waste comes in.
Yeah.
They should care.
Yeah.
So I have written them.
So
and
if someone is watching this show and belongs to one of those organizations, they should be reaching out to
that
people,
organization,
to that
and say,
organization.
call Environment and Human Health.
Call Nancy.
You should put up the website
Yes.
and to say that the contact information for Nancy Alderman, Environment and Human Health, is on that website.
Okay. And then in addition to that, there must be people in the legislature you believe who are going to be favorable toward this from the very beginning.
Yes.
So people should be reaching out to their own state legislators, to
Absolutely.
the senators, and to the reps.
Yes.
And as we tape this now, this is early September of 2012, so there's an election going on. People, I think, should be bringing this up in forums, because people are the candidates are out, they're talking to the voters now. So if you're a voter, you should be talking to your state rep candidates, to your state senate candidates, and saying, where do you stand on this issue?
Exactly.
Anything we should do at a town level? Is there anything that a town can do to make this not happen in their town?
Actually, I have read that some towns in Pennsylvania, I think, maybe I'm speaking
No, I think you're right.
incorrectly, but some towns have banned it. But I can tell you from working on outdoor wood furnaces, where we have had trouble getting anything done at the state, and they're making so many people sick, that we have banned outdoor wood furnaces in 17 towns. But we have 169 towns.
Right.
So, I don't
But
know
I'm
what
thinking
to
about
say.
this not so much from a practicality point of view, because as you say, there's 169 towns. They're quite small geographically, so you can't control the problem that way. But it seems to me a good way to raise awareness.
I agree with that, and certainly if they will look at the map of where the shale is,
Right. Now, where
those
is...
towns, it goes right through the middle of the state.
Right. Okay.
So I can't give you the towns other than it goes underneath the Capitol
Okay.
and the LOB in
Right.
Hartford.
Yeah.
They could have it being
So we
drilled
don't-
in front of their front door.
We don't want Bushnell Park to be full of gas fracking wells.
Exactly.
Right. So that's a good place to start.
Elizabeth Park could have a fracking well on top of it.
My goodness.
My
All right.
goodness.
So, Nancy, thank you very much for coming back and seeing us.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you back at the beginning of the legislative session to see what you're teeing up there, because
Okay.
I know you're working very hard.
We are.
And we're also going to do some other shows as well.
Okay. Sounds good.
Terrific. And Doug,
Okay.
Thank you. And see you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
That's our show for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. You can find all our shows on YouTube by going to youtube.com/user/DFATVnet. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. Or you can send comments or suggestions for a show to info@dfa-tv.net. If you'd like to learn more about progressive political action, we meet at 7 p.m. on the first Wednesday of the month at the Silver Star Diner in Norwalk. We'd love to have you join us. Remember, change is possible, and you can make it happen. This has been Stream of Conscience, and I'm your host, John Hartwell. Thanks for watching.